I didn't mean to become a therapist. It's totally true. I actually planned on keeping all of my hair, and yet here we are 10 years later. Hey, everybody, I'm TJ Walsh, a therapist like many of you, and a certified Clini-Coach specializing in helping folks grow their creativity from the heart. Over the course of the next half hour, you're going to get a ton of valuable information that you can use right away in your life and in the lives of your clients. So, here's the scoop. I actually had the goal to be a full time professional painter. Not the house painting type of painter, although that might have been kinda cool, but the type of painter who spent his days alone in the studio making amazing works of art that would be shown in all of the premier museums and beautiful white box gallery spaces where most artists only dream about showing their work. That's who I wanted to be. That's what I thought I wanted. But the reality for me was that sitting alone in my studio navel gazing just wasn't for me. The truth is, like many of you, I am a person who is motivated by community. I do best when other people are gathered around me, encouraging me, holding me accountable, and expanding my vision of what it means to be a human being and an artist. So I found myself faced with some options. Be a house painter, buy some white gloves, invest thousands of hours and dollars into an MFA, or just maybe reach for something bigger and maybe less expensive in theory. But in the end, instead of going back to school to get my MFA, I chose to go back to school to study counseling psychology, just like many of you. And after a little bit of fumbling and figuring it out, I realized that I didn't have to retire that artist mentality. I realized that I could be just as creative, if not more, working with other human beings, creating the type of community and individual growth that kept me going. The very same thing that we do as therapists today. This was a real shift in my mindset, challenging my inner critic, talking back to it, talking back to that internal narrative that I'm only legitimate if I'm locked in my studio alone. Not true at all. The reality that I can be equally, if not more, creative in community changed my perspective entirely. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today, that no matter which path you've chosen, there is still room to grow your creative heart. Now, maybe you're an artist already, and maybe you're frustrated because the current reality that you live in causes you to believe that your ideas are not good enough to be taken seriously as a creative, reimagined modern therapist. And maybe you feel lost because you're forging a new path and no one seems to get it. And maybe you're a bit of a black sheep like I was, all alone in the pasture where sheeps tend to hang out, wandering around aimlessly with no one to help guide your innovations and ideas. Or maybe you're also like me and find that you aren't following the path that you thought you should take. And maybe you're feeling pulled between creativity and the status quo. No matter what, it's not the truth. It's not based in fact. It's a myth that you can't be someone who's an amazing therapist and who is bursting at the seams with ideas and inspiration. You aren't meant to be a boring blank slate, and you are meant to be driven, vibrant, and generative. So, again, listen closely because I want to let you know that if you're feeling burnt out, and let's be honest, you are, if you're feeling like your creative well has run dry, if you're having trouble bringing your whole self to the therapy room, there is a way to get thirsty again. And I'm going to show you where it is. There are options inside of you, and there are ways forward down a scenic street of serenity. And before you think that this talk isn't for you, I want you to lean in a little closer because whether or not you realize it, you are most definitely a creative person. Hang in there with me because I'm going to lay out for you my method for growing into the creative person that you are. We'll look at goals, realities, options in front of you, and ways forward. Just like painters, sculptors, dancers, musicians, and writers all work to communicate the tragic and the beautiful through their mediums, you help your clients uncover their deepest, darkest, and let's be real, sometimes boring life stories. But you also get to welcome home the lightest and brightest emotions by opening the door to possibility and hope. Regardless of whether you take a psychodynamic approach or you utilize the golden star of insurance, CBT, you are in a unique position as an artist of humanity. Let me say that again. You are in a unique position as an artist of humanity to be able to approach other people and their challenges in ways that help them navigate the inevitable ups and downs of life more successfully is and of itself a boldly creative act. As a therapist, you're able to pivot at a moment's notice and see yards ahead of you when things seem pretty murky. Now, at its heart, therapy is an art form. The art of therapy takes focus, continuous learning, and a willingness to get up when you fall down. And you need to have persistence that rivals that of the greatest Olympic athlete and surrender that mimics that of a parent. And just like artists become absorbed in the process of making their work that they forget their processes altogether, you become so close to other stories that you become blind to the incremental growth that is taking place right before your very eyes. And just like an artist working by themselves in their studio, often with very little input from the outside, you typically work by yourself with your clients in the therapy room without anyone to offer feedback, support, and encouragement along the way. And when you spend so much time alone, the shit talking in your head really starts to creep in, and you lose sight of the creative spark for your own life and your own journey. Now, maybe you're the rare exception to these occupational hazards, but I kind of doubt it. I've learned this the hard way, and I want something different for you. I want something different for you because I personally know what it's like to feel all of these things. Truly, I do. So over time, working out my own shit and helping others work out their shit, I developed four pillars to take a look at so that we can cultivate your creativity for the first time ever or get it sparked up once again. So, because we're therapists, we all love acronyms. So I put this into an acronym, these four categories for us: grow, goals, realities, options, and ways forward. Set some goals for yourself. What is one project that you want to finish this year? Think about it. Now, remember, as a reimagined therapist and artist of humanity, you are constantly pivoting. And when you don't have a plan, it can be really difficult to see what's ahead of you, especially when the outcome seems somewhat hazy or murky. It's super, super important that you set goals for yourself so that you can clear the field to plant the seeds for your creativity to grow. Now, it's great to have BHAGs or big, hairy, audacious goals because they help to propel you forward. In my mind, BHAGs are kind of like fertilizer for your creative seeds to take root and gain nutrients. But it's equally important to have micro goals. Now, micro goals are small, sometimes single step goals that break the big, hairy, audacious goal or BHAG down into more manageable, bite sized pieces. A long time ago, I was a pretty intense runner. I know you can totally tell, right? Anyway, as my life grew around me, starting one business, getting married, starting another business, starting a family, growing the first business, having another kid just a few weeks ago, my running and physical health took a hit. So earlier this year, I decided that I had to get back to running. I tried on my own. I tried to push myself to achieve what I was able to do all those years ago. The thing was, it was out of my reach. I was out of practice. I was easily frustrated and I almost gave up. I decided, nay, nay, I am not giving up. So I began to work with a running coach and things began to open up for me. Why do you think this is? Well, it's because I brought someone into my world who knows what they're doing and could help me turn my frustration into motivation. He helped me create micro goals for myself so that I could experience the improvement that I was making on a daily basis and take incremental steps toward my BHAG, which was running greater and greater distances. A part of being able to set goals is the ability to understand the current realities of your situation. And a big part of that is to work on understanding why your mindset is the way it is. what voices you're listening to and talking them down, and creating a new narrative for yourself. A narrative that is actually based in reality, not perceived reality. You really need to address your fears, work like the Dickens to tame your critic, and embrace the process, the adventure that you're on. This is critical, y'all. You spend so much time living in fear, listening to the awful critic that takes up so much effing space in your head that you lose sight of the process. The process is where you need to live, not in the what ifs or the should do's. Now, maybe you're a magician, but most of the artists I know, me included sometimes, become so entrenched in the work that is 6 inches from our face that we're blinded from seeing the growth that's taking place all around us. And when you spend so much time working alone, the inner critic can really zap you of your creative spark. You gotta surround yourself with other people, other makers, other creators, healers, so your blinders can come off and you can see the realities around you. Almost always, the realities are different than what your critic is yammering on about. Okay. So once you have adjusted your reality and mindset and you've told the critic to go sit the F down, you might notice that there are some gaps that are keeping you from moving forward. Have you noticed that? Have you ever noticed that there are some gaps between you and the place that you want to be? There have been times in my life when I knew that I should be making progress, but I just kept getting caught in what seemed to be quicksand. I always felt like I was sinking. Why wasn't this working? Why isn't that working? I was so caught up in the destination or where I thought I needed to be that I wasn't paying attention to the gaps that were in front of me and that needed to be closed first. I bet you can relate. We're not that different. Once you work on your mindset and quiet down that critic, you're able to address your gaps. And these gaps are the gap of skill, effort, and quality. So often you run into gaps in your ability to achieve your creative genius that you stall out and get stuck back in the vacuum of listening to your critic. Now, if you understand these basic gaps in your creativity, you'll be able to come up with options to push yourself forward, to nurture your creative soil, and grow in your creative genius. Again, the creative gaps that show up are these: effort gap, skill gap, quality gap. The effort gap is all about the time that you put into your craft. Now, if you want to grow, you have to put in the time, plain and simple. Plain and simple. You can sit around waiting for lightning to strike, but you could be waiting for a long ass time. I've tried it. It's a long time. You need to be dedicated and persistent in your approach to cultivating your creativity. How much time are you dedicating to achieving your micro goals? How often are you tilling the soil? What would it be like if you dedicated just 1 or 2 more hours per week to your project? Sometimes you simply haven't built up your creative muscles or skills enough, though, to accomplish the task that you first set out to complete. And that's okay. Secondly, it means you need to put in more effort to gain the skills. Now, quality is another gap that pops up and can easily be discouraging. Sometimes you put in the time and you have the skills, but the quality for some reason suffers. You get frustrated because you think that you should be receiving the recognition for your amazing stuff. Certainly, I'm as good as that person who won that award. I'm definitely better than that dude who got that show. Yeah, that could be true. But there are only so many of those opportunities at any given time. So it's more advantageous for us to just keep putting in the work and improving our skills, keeping our head down, our nose to the grindstone, not losing faith. Keep tilling the soil, fertilizing your creative spirit, and really get clear on why you pursue your creative passions. And once you understand where your gaps lie and have come up with some ways of tackling them, you can cast your vision, set your mission, and make some moves to complete the project that you identified a few minutes ago by the end of the year and nurture your artistic practice day after day. Now, this process has helped me, and I know it will help you find your creative flow again, create more effortlessly, finish your projects happily, and feel like yourself again. Now, let me tell you a story. Even before I was a therapist, I was a space holder for lots of people. For as long as I can remember, I've had this ability to draw people in and have conversations with them. And before I knew it, all of a sudden, these strangers were really comfortable talking to me about whatever it was that was on their minds, their hearts, and what was in their souls. It would just come out of them, and it was profound. I know that experience is true for you too. That's part of the reason why we were drawn to actually go into this work in the first place. When you add on an extra layer of being creative, though, almost always or very often you live with a high degree of sensitivity, emotional attunement, and you carry this stuff around with you in different ways than normal people who seem to be able to compartmentalize or can easily let things kind of roll off their back. You become like Atlas and you carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. For a long time, I was really drawn to the idea of the wounded healer. Now, this isn't a new concept at all, but you probably have even heard about it. But if you are unfamiliar, the idea behind the wounded healer is this: in order to become a true healer, one has to be wounded themselves first. The image that you see here on the screen is a universal mythological motif or archetype that was described in Eliad's book about the initiation or creation or manifestation of medicine men and women or shamans. According to the book, nobody becomes a medicine man or a shaman without first having been wounded. You're either cut open by the initiator of this process, or you have certain magical stones inserted into your body, or sometimes a spear is thrown at your neck, or some such thing. That really sounds intense, right? But however it happens, these mythological people always must be pierced or cut apart before they become healers themselves, because that's how they acquire the capacity for healing other people. They must live the transformational experience. But this archetype shouldn't be viewed as static. The metaphor for initiating a process that is ongoing and transformative is that dynamic process within the healer, and it cannot become stagnant. If a healer becomes static, they're simply a person absorbed by pain, constantly defending their own suffering. Don't touch my boo boo, if you will. Someone can only heal as far as they themselves are transformed and have been healed through their wounds. And just like many of you, I have my own personal story of being wounded. And it starts back with the story that I told you a few minutes ago when I was talking about always being someone who carries everything for others, who holds space for them, who allows them to dump everything onto me. And then when they're done doing that, I'm left standing there like, what? But this, of course, caused me way back then, even when I was young, before I was a therapist, to lose sight of my creative growth in an attempt to gain control over these narratives that I didn't write. The more and more that people piled onto me without me taking care of myself or putting that stuff to the side, the more the creative spark in me began to die down. I know that you can relate to that incredible weight and responsibility. And maybe you've been sick too. But I had my aha moment. It wasn't until my sophomore year of art school that someone started to notice that this was going on for me. Two professors who had the responsibility of reviewing all of my work for the semester stopped dead and said, "Listen, we've got to talk, TJ. We're not going to talk about your work right now. We're actually going to be talking about you." Now, ultimately, what happened was that during my sophomore year of art school, I've never had this happen before, where people who were very focused and detail oriented on very specific things, I didn't really think would pay very much attention to me personally, because I'm just not used to people paying attention to me in that way. Came to me during final crits of the semester where all of my work was up on the wall, and I was ready to receive this criticism, to get this feedback, to learn my fate of this semester, which was really hard, right? But they didn't crit my art at all. They called me out, like really called me out. They said, TJ, you came into our classes as one person and now you're completely different. I found out that I lost myself and others for so long and I didn't realize it. And it was at that moment that I wanted to put my paint down and brushes down forever. I felt exposed and vulnerable and horrified. But in that same moment, I realized that I needed to go back to what I knew, which was taking time to creatively, experientially process all of the shit that was being put on me by other people. Now, I wasn't a therapist yet at that time, but I knew that this was going to have to be something that I took with me throughout my life. And that included moving through the process of being a therapist and then ultimately having a successful private group practice. Painting to me became a life source. It became the process where I would sew myself back up together, where I would take the spear out of my neck, where I would take those poison jewels or whatever the hell it was out of my body and just bring myself back together. Leave that stuff that people put on me, that residue behind. As creative practitioners, as creative people, we need that space. There's an artist called Marc Chagall, who many of us might know, but he has a quote and it's really powerful to me. It goes, God or someone give me the power to breathe my sigh into my canvases, the sigh of prayer and sadness, the prayer of salvation and of rebirth. Will God or someone give me the power to breathe my sigh into the canvas, the sigh of prayer and sadness and of salvation and rebirth? That is what my studio practice outside of my therapy practice is about, to breathe my sigh onto my canvas, on my paper. For some of you, it might be music, it might be dance, it might be cooking or writing or singing or organizing your spice cabinets. For others of you, it might be writing poetry or prose. But once you truly and emphatically breathe your sighs into your art, magic's gonna happen and you will grow. So, after many years of working with artists, creative entrepreneurs, public figures, all these people who really come on heavy, I knew that I had to help other people breathe their sigh onto their canvases. My purpose here is to offer you ways to pour back into yourself, to tie your broken, wounded, heavy laden pieces back together. Now, I do this through creating community, through designing inspiration, through beautifying education. You're finding that you're frantic, chaotic, or not focused because you need to control yourself, others, and circumstances in order to try to force a guaranteed outcome. Maybe you're collecting all of these not attended to things and it's getting messy. You have a ton of unfinished paintings and unfinished pages because you're too burnt the fuck out from the clinical side of things. You just don't have the energy to tend to the creativity that is your core. You're tired of feeling the need to measure up, and you're finding that you're falling into perfectionistic patterns. You're feeling lonely and isolated because there isn't the feedback or challenge you crave because you isolate instead of asking for help. You turn away from others instead of turning toward them. If you're sitting here and thinking to yourself, that's me. I want you to consider connecting with me after this talk so that we can look at your motives, at the realities of your present situation, at the options that you have for changing things in your life and finding a way forward to make those changes possible so that you can reach your goals. I am on this earth to help you grow in your creative life so that not only do you feel more fulfilled and more whole, but so that your clients do too. I recently started a community for creatives called the Bold Creatives Collective. The response over the past few months has blown me away. It's one manifestation or one offering that I've cultivated for artists, sensitive people, creative people to come together in community for encouragement and inspiration, and also learning about how they can take their creative blocks, the stuff that keeps them stuck, and push it out onto the canvases to create something uniquely beautiful, maybe something messy, and maybe something only your mother would love, but always something that makes the necessary space to let it all go with that sigh of prayer and sadness and salvation and rebirth. This is your official invitation into a community of other therapists and other creative individuals, a sacred creative space to gain inspiration, encouragement, and education so that you're born anew and ready to get back in that room with your people, the people whose canvases you're called to breathe life back into. So, will you join me? Check out boldcreativescollective.com and enter the code Reimagine 2021 to download your free guide, 4 steps to grow your creative life, and to schedule a free creative brainstorm session with me. This short guide will take you deeper into the grow method and help you begin to live your creative life more boldly. You can even use it with your clients. It's a win win, right? Once again, everybody, I'm TJ Walsh, and I can't wait to continue to help you grow your creative hearts and lives in the Bold Creatives Collective. And I'm looking forward to hanging out with you more over the next day or so at the Therapy Reimagined 2021 conference. I'm so glad to be here with you, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from you soon. Have a great day, everybody.